Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third Interim Joint Committee on Judiciary meeting. And if everyone could please find your way to your seats. We do have a quorum. We are awaiting a few people. We have a lot on the agenda today, so we will try to move as expeditiously as possible. And please note, because this is interim and no action is taking, some of these topics there will be a continuing discussion that goes on post-meeting today. We've worked really diligently this session, I believe, to try to get small groups together to try to make sure we have as much information about these topics as possible before they come before our session, our General Assembly in January. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. And Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Senator Byrd,
Present in the room.
Senator Carroll, Senator Kerr, Senator Neal, Senator Schickel.
He's present.
It's LRC office.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Schickel. Senator Schroeder, Senator Stivers, Senator Turner. Thank you. Senator West, Senator Wheeler.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Banta.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Blanton.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Bratcher.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Cantrell. Thank you. Representative Decker.
You're gonna get
Representative Elliott.
catch your breath.
Representative
We're gonna do that
Fisher.
next.
Representative Heverin.
We are gonna do it.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Kulkarni.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Lewis. Representative Maddox. Maybe it's me. Nope. Representative McCoy. Representative Minter. Representative Mosier.
Here in the room.
Excuse me. Thank you. Representative Nemus.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Petrie. Representative Scott. Representative Stevenson. Chairman Westerfield. I see you're present. And Chairman Massey.
Here in the room, and we are going to take a very small break. We know there's an audio problem because we've been told by some of the people that are appearing remotely that they cannot hear anything. So we are going to try to make sure that we get that fixed momentarily. But while we do that, I am going to bring something to the attention of everybody here if you've not seen it. This morning, there was a very unfortunate death of a law enforcement officer. He was an assistant deputy sheriff, I believe, in Shively, that by all accounts, it appears he was ambushed and targeted and killed. And his name is Brandon Shirley, is my understanding. And you know how tragic that is just for society, but I can't imagine the tragedy that the family must feel. And of course, the fact that that's going on in what we consider to be a civilized society on our streets is just tragic. So if you'll join me for just a moment, we're going to have a moment of silence in honor of Officer Brandon Shirley. Thank you. I know that was brought to my attention by Representative Nemus, and Representative Bratcher also brought it to my attention. They may know more than I know, but certainly we have to find ways to stop that kind of conduct and behavior because we just, we're losing too many people. Any luck?
No. Systems, and
Okay.
so it might be that they need to.
Chairman, while we're waiting, I wanted to mention that Officer Shirley had received the Medal of Honor last year, Medal of Valor last year from Sheriff Aubrey. So this was in any law enforcement, we lose any law enforcement life, it's very meaningful. This man is a young man. He joined the force in 2018, and he'd already shown how much is a great service to our community, and it's a tremendous loss. He was also in the court security division of our sheriff's office, and he was ambushed while he
Did
was.
they take roll call yet?
While he was in his car, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Schickel, we do have you recorded. Can you hear us? No, he can't. So, all right. Anything else, Representative? All right, we have help on the way that I believe is going to try to accommodate this. We don't want our people that are working remotely to not be able to hear the important discussions that are going on. I am going to go ahead and ask, we're going to go a little bit out of order. If you see the agenda here, we have 3 or 4 things, and I'm going to get to those and approve the minutes as soon as we have audio, but the anti-SLAPP legislation, anti-swatting legislation, virtual judicial proceedings, and enhanced penalties for fentanyl offenses. I am going to take the last first, and that will be the enhanced penalties for fentanyl offenses. So while we're waiting for this to get fixed, Representative Fugit, if you and your guest would like to come forward and get situated, we will call you as soon as we get confirmation that our audio is working.
Let me ask Senator Russell to ask. They're all mute.
Can those of you remotely hear us now?
I got thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. We have been reset. Like everything else, you have to unplug and start over. All right. With that, we do have to approve the minutes from the July 8, 2021 meeting.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Seconded.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? There is none. With that, good morning, Representative Fugit. Please feel free to proceed, introduce your guest, and we have told all of the presenters today that the time frame we're on, they're well aware of that, so we'll let you, we understand there's a delay, so we'll let you get your time in, so please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for allowing us to come before you today on what I feel like is could be a great, or one of the most important pieces of legislation that we'll probably look at in the next upcoming session. I am Representative Chris Fugit. I represent the 84th District, which is Perry and part of Harlan County, and I have a guest with me today. I'll let him introduce himself and then take off with the presentation.
Hello, I'm Scott Blair. I'm the Scott Blair, the Commonwealth Attorney in Perry County, 33rd Judicial Circuit. We're here today about increased penalties for fentanyl, as you know. Back last year, Perry County got brought into the world of fentanyl, reined in really fast. We had an overdose. 4 people died immediately. It was fentanyl and carfentanil, I think. And so when they had 2 officers who responded to this, and they changed their mask or their gloves or something, and when they did this, they must have inhaled some of the fentanyl, and both of them had to be Narcan, one of them twice. So we got reined in a really good way, bad way, but a severe way. I don't know if you've seen the statistics that just came out the other day, but in 2020, overdoses went up in Kentucky by almost 50%. We had almost 2,000 overdoses, and out of those 2,000, 70% involved fentanyl. In Perry County, I can speak, we have seen a drastic increase in overdose deaths. I mean, we had a drug problem anyway with the opioid crisis. It's gotten far worse with fentanyl. I mean, a lot of times these people don't know it's in the drug, or the dealers don't even know it's in the drugs. Sometimes they do know. Sometimes it's sort of a status symbol to be the one where somebody died. Narcan has been having to put on all the flop houses, and it's just gotten to be a really big problem. We can't do anything. We got one of the big fentanyl dealers the other day, and he told the police, go ahead and do what you want to do. I know they can't do much to me anyway. and put the bond as high as you want it, I can make it. So that's what we're fighting, and we're losing too many of our young people to it. And so that's why I'm here today, and I appreciate Representative Fugit inviting me up. It's an honor to be here, and I'll turn it back over to him with that.
Thank you, Scott. And Scott approached me. I think I told this story of the 10 it was actually 10 overdoses at one time in Hazard. Four deaths. 4 had to be triple Narcaned, and the 2 Hazard police officers had to be double Narcaned so they could live. Prior to me being in the state legislature, I served 22 years with the Kentucky State Police, 3 years as a radio dispatcher, 9.5 years on the road as a trooper, 9.5 years as part of the High to Drug Task Force. And back in those days, it was prescription medication, Lorcet, Oxycontin, oxycodone. That was the big deal on the streets, Tylox and all that. And so we dealt with that. And then toward the end of my career, methamphetamine came on the scene, and we dismantled meth labs, 3 or 4 a week. And so it was dangerous. But when you start talking about fentanyl, it raises to a whole new level because just the exposure to the fentanyl can result in death. And so you look at the kids that are in the houses where fentanyl is being trafficked. You look at all the deaths of possible deaths to the police officers that respond, and to those that are on the street who are users. So what this bill will do, this bill request or this draft that's been written, would enhance the penalty for fentanyl, trafficking in fentanyl, or lacing marijuana with fentanyl, any derivative of fentanyl, and any kind of drug pressing fentanyl into pill form would require those persons that are found guilty of trafficking to serve 85% of the jail time that they receive from a jury. If they receive 10 years, they have to serve 8.5 years with no possibility of parole, shock probation, diversion, or anything. They'll have to serve a flat 85%. So if you think about, the value of life, these drug traffickers, they know what they're selling. The people that are buying, they don't really know what they're buying in a lot of instances. And so I appreciate our Commonwealth attorney stepping forward and being kind of the lead within the Commonwealth attorneys across Kentucky. And I'm honored to be able to try to pass or pack this through the legislature so we can get it passed and protect those in our streets and homes and hollers.
Thank you, Representative Fugit. I know that many of our members have heard that story before, and certainly just like the story we talked about earlier today, that's tragic. And we, as policymakers, have to find ways to address that. So thank you for bringing this forward. We do have some questions. Senator Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Fugit, for bringing up this important subject. And one thing I was wondering, have you all also thought about some civil forfeiture penalties as well, based on what the Commonwealth attorney said about I'm able to make any bond? It sounds like some people are making a lot of money off of this, and to the extent that we can actually find them or create some private causes of action for victims to get assets might be something I think that would have an impact as well. And I guess my second part of that is really more of a comment. I was just looking on NBC News, and do you all look at? It seems like a lot of this fentanyl is coming out of China, and it just says right here in 2009 they had, or 2019 they seized just 2 pounds of fentanyl, and 2020 9 pounds of fentanyl. And already during the 2021 fiscal year, agents have found 41 pounds so far coming over the southern border. Do you think that controlling our southern border and the failure of Washington to do that is placing some of our young people at risk in eastern Kentucky and other rural areas?
To answer your first question, as far as the forfeiture of money, that we have that already have laws on the books that allows police officers to seize money and it to be forfeited. Now, as far as going to the victims of the crimes, I don't know if there's any legislation that would do that. Second part of the question, of course, there's a lot of things we could blame as far as the fentanyl coming in. That's one of them. If we tightened up on the borders and all that, but really, Kentucky could be the state that would kind of set the bar of we're not going to put up with any fentanyl traffickers in Kentucky. You're going to be punished if you come to Kentucky and sell this stuff to our kids and our people. Then we're going to punish you in Kentucky. And I don't have any control over the border, but hopefully we can do something in Kentucky that would discourage people from bringing fentanyl into our state.
Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for bringing this piece before us today. Quick question. It's been a few years since I've studied KRS, and fentanyl wasn't, in my day, like Representative Fugit, wasn't an issue. What class felony is fentanyl trafficking currently?
Class C.
It's Class C.
Schedule 2, like opioids and.
Okay.
It's Class
and
C.
Currently, they would serve what percentage?
50%.
50%.
But they could be shock probated out also.
Okay. So I asked those questions because a lot of people are not familiar with the classifications of felonies and how long they're already pulling. So potentially with probation and different things, someone that's trafficking in fentanyl could get charged in a matter of just a very few years, be out and back on the street and back to trafficking in fentanyl.
Yes, sir.
And it is a very, very extremely dangerous drug. As a matter of fact, just yesterday in Ashland, here in Kentucky, 2 police officers there from the Ashland PD was involved in a traffic stop. Someone in possession of fentanyl resisted. Somehow or another, the fentanyl was, I guess, thrown and become airborne, and they had to take the 2 officers to the emergency room because of their exposure to the fentanyl. Very deadly drug for the officers and even for those people taking it. I would also note that for those that are unaware, generally most crimes, if it's not violent or drug-related in Kentucky, is a 20% serve sentence. Some are 50%, a very select few. But in the federal system, it's an 85% serviture on your crime. So this isn't new necessarily. We see it all the time in the federal system. And we need to keep these people. Part of our responsibility is to keep our public safe. And keeping these people off the street as long as possible is doing that. Now, we've just lived through a year and close to a year and a half we're pushing towards. And one of the arguments or one of the statements that I've heard time and time again is every life matters. Well, either every life matters all the time or it doesn't. You can't pick and choose what issues that every life matters. And so if keeping an individual off the street that is trafficking in fentanyl for a longer period of time is protecting lives, we're hearing about the increase in overdose deaths, then do not we owe it to our citizenry to keep those people off of the streets? You see, what we have lost focus on, whether it's fentanyl or injustice in general, with the new catchphrase of criminal justice reform, is actually a disguise for being soft on crime. And all we're doing is creating more victims. All we're doing is costing more lives. As a matter of fact, with all the rhetoric that's been going on over the past year, with all the softening of things, we led to a deputy getting assassinated this morning in Louisville, Kentucky. You can agree to disagree, but the truth is truth, and it'll stand when the world's on fire. The things that we're doing are getting softer on these people. You don't want to know how you fix the problem? You get tough on crime. And we're worried about $1. Let's be honest. That's all we hear about is how much it costs to incarcerate people. There was a bill back several years ago that nobody in law enforcement supported. House Bill 463 that had done nothing but hurt and create more victims in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, we're either going to stand by and protect the citizens of this Commonwealth that we took an oath to do, or we're not. It's time we stop being soft on crime. If we want to solve the problem, let's build more prisons. Hey, build them up in my area. We can put people to work. We got people that'll fill the positions up there. but letting everybody out. And another fallacy that's contributed to the fentanyl problem, to the overdose problem, to the problems we've seen with our police dying on the streets is this fallacy that all these poor individuals that's in prison are just there because they possess some drugs. Then you are either willfully ignorant to the situation or you are purposely misleading people. They may have pled to that possession, but they were charged with trafficking, the vast majority of them. Nobody, Mr. Commonwealth Attorney, you know this to be a fact, nobody goes to prison on a first offense possession of a drug. It just doesn't happen. Don't happen in Kentucky. As a matter of fact, it's multiple times. We keep talking about second chances. We just had brought in a few weeks ago a family in Louisville that lost their son from somebody who shouldn't have even been on the street. How many times do we give these people second chances? And this fentanyl is just another issue. I'll support you, brother, Representative Fugit. I'll sign on to co-sponsor your bill to push for 85% for fentanyl, but I think we need to look at other crimes that need to be increased to 85%. It's time we protect the citizens of the Commonwealth that are good, hardworking taxpayers and stop creating victims in this Commonwealth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Blanton. I am not going to cut anybody off. That's not ever my intention, but I will tell you that we do have a lot on the agenda today, so try to keep your comments as brief as possible. Next, we have Representative Bratcher.
Thank you, sir. Representative Fugit, thank you for bringing this. Is fentanyl, maybe you or your partner there will know, is fentanyl a brand name or is it just the type of a drug?
100% sure I'm not. I think it's a type of drug, just like cocaine, heroin. It's a type of a drug, not like and some of the doctors or Representative Moser could probably answer that. But I think it's a type of drug, not just a pharmaceutical name.
Is it manufactured locally or is it all of it brought in across the border and whatnot?
As far as I know, it's manufactured other places and brought in.
And one last thing, I take it that because like officers and whatnot on their first time exposure must have medical treatment, that it is an opioid, and the end user, the supposed end user, has such a high tolerance that they can handle it, but a first time user, it will kill them. Is just like heroin, powerful heroin versus cut heroin? Is that the deal?
Yes.
Thank you.
I know that we have a few other questions. Did you want to comment? I know Representative Mosier was just say what fentanyl was, if you want to quickly say that.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to help clarify. Fentanyl is an opioid. It's a synthetic opioid, and so it's manufactured to be about 10 times stronger than heroin in really simplistic terms.
Next, we have Representative Derek Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Representative Mosier's comments and Senator Wheeler and Representative Bratcher. In pharmacy, you typically don't see much fentanyl these days. When it is prescribed, it's typically given to terminal cancer patients, but you don't really see much anymore. To my understanding, and from the people I've talked to in the DEA, most of it's coming from China, going to Mexico, and then coming up through the border. Fentanyl and also carfentanyl. But Representative Fugit, Scott, I just wanted to thank you all for bringing this here. I remember being on the House floor next to Representative Fugit. I think Representative Blanton was there too, as all this was going down, and it's heartbreaking for the families, not only in Eastern Kentucky but across Kentucky as a whole in our nation. I'm in support of this bill and look forward to helping you craft it going forward. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lewis. Next, we have Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fugit, I also appreciate you bringing this. All I would ask is that my 40-some years you've been an officer and I've been in the court system, we ought to mandate some type of rehab and education, because these people are going to be back out on the street, and they're back in there again, and And I know that some of them won't even go through the SLAPP program, will spend their time instead of getting out 15 or 18 months earlier. So we should mandate statutorily that they're rehabbed while they're in there, so that when they come back out on the street, we don't have them 1, 2, and 3, 4 times, whether it's this or meth or whatever. I sense it and see it all the time, and I know the Department of Justice has their own things that they want them to get rehabbed and whatever. But I think we should mandate that legislatively at the same time, so that it's just like the 85%. That they've got to go through that rehab, set in those classes and go. They don't have no choice to. So I'd appreciate, and I'll work with you on that if you so desire from this side. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had to look this up. I remembered from a couple years ago, we've talked about what a deadly substance fentanyl and carfentanil are. We amended the manslaughter in the second-degree statute to include if the proximate cause of death is the result of a Schedule 1 or 2 substance, then the trafficker or the person who supplied those substances could also be charged with manslaughter in the second degree. Now, they're both Class Cs, so I'm wondering if you know of anyone who's been charged under that new statute before we go changing it again, and whether the flexibility that you're asking for here is maybe a little bit premature.
Go ahead.
I'll take that. We actually have one case that we're using that to go on that way. The problem is that a lot of times it's sort of hard to get if it's a proximate cause or not, because all you get is text messages or rumors, or this person got it from this person or that person got it from that person, and then everybody, it's the code of silence. Everything gets silent. So it's sort of like, to give you a crazy example, it's sort of like counting on someone to know how to land the plane who's not a pilot if something happens to the pilot. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like, because it's really hard to prove. A lot of times it's hard to make that jump. As a matter of fact, I was in Louisville. You guys from Louisville might have seen it a couple of weeks ago, and there was a big issue on the TV there about how they're trying to go about investigating and proving all these to make the proximate cause. And a lot of it, too, is a lot more. We don't have the legwork in Perry County to go do all the detective work. I mean, because actually all of our state police, county, and city are fighting against the drugs and everything else that's going on. They don't have time to go and do all the detective stuff a lot of the time. So
I understand that. Thank you.
Representative Nemus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the representative, my friend, Mr. Fugit, for bringing this bill. I'm a criminal justice reformer, and I support this bill. I want to say something. I have to say, Mr. Chairman, criminal justice reform properly conceived has two focuses. The first focus is to make sure that we don't have future victims. We have fewer future victims. We want to treat an addict different than a trafficker. That's what this bill does. That's why criminal justice reformers, I think, will be supportive of this bill. We want to keep people who are trafficking this stuff in prison for a long time. We're not talking about reforming these types of folks. We are longer term, but we need to keep them off our street longer. And we're only talking about 8.5 years here if they get the maximum sentence of 10 years under a Class C. If they get the minimum, which is 5 years and 1 day, it's 85% of that. We're not talking about lifetime in prison here. And I agree with my friend, the senator from Senator Turner, and that we need to mandate treatment. Criminal justice reformers believe in treatment very deeply. So do you, Representative Fugit. We believe that people need to go through the substance abuse program. We believe in dismissed charities and things of that nature. Criminal justice reformers and hard-on crimers like my good friend, who I love, Representative Blanton, agree on a great deal. So the first focus of criminal justice reform is to have fewer victims in the future. These folks are going to get out of prison at some point. And the addicts, our neighbors, our family members who we love, we need to treat them, not throw them away and lock the door and throw them away. We need to get them treatment. That's what criminal justice reform is about. That's point number one. Point number two, as the Commonwealth Attorney said, we don't have the legs to do all this work. Criminal justice reformers believe that properly allocating scarce resources on serious crimes like trafficking fentanyl is what we need to focus on. And so by properly allocating our scarce judicial resources, we can go after serious crime and then leave the people who need to be treated to treatment. So that's what criminal justice reform is. I know my friend throws some pejoratives at us, but we are in it to reduce victims, the future victims. So this bill, I'd like to request to be a co-sponsor of, because this is right in line with what criminal justice reformers support, and that is to go after serious crime that will reduce future victims. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Nemus, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. We'll continue to discuss and work on this. It sounds like there's some things that your discussion has started that might even strengthen the bill, and so we'll look to that in the future. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we're going to move on to the anti-SLAPP legislation, and we will have Representative Kulkarni and Representative Nemus. And laughingly, I will tell you that my assistant, Josh Nacy, said we could call this the swatting and slapping meeting. So we're going to have the anti-SLAPP legislation piece now. So go ahead and come and get situated. And when you're ready to proceed, please introduce yourself, and we'll be glad to hear from you.
All right, we're ready. Do we need to introduce ourselves?
We're ready to proceed. You can introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
All right, I'm State Representative Nima Kulkarni, currently serving the 40th District in Jefferson County.
State Representative Jason Nemus, the 33rd District in Jefferson County and Oldham County.
Well, I'd like to start, Chairman, by thanking you, by thanking Vice Chair Banta, Representatives Petrie, Elliott, Josh Nacy, and my colleague, Representative Nemus, who signed on as a co-sponsor for this bill in this past session. We're going to be discussing anti-SLAPP legislation, which is a bipartisan measure. It has broad bipartisan support. I want to give a quick shout out to the staff. They had forwarded a series of statements to you all this morning of organizations that support anti-SLAPP legislation, ranging from the ACLU to Americans for Prosperity, the Bluegrass Institute, the Pegasus Institute, the KPA, Open Government Coalition, and national groups like the Public Participation Project and the Uniform Law Commission, which we will be talking about a little bit later. So I wanted to start with explaining what SLAPP lawsuits are. And with a show of hands, I'd like to ask members how many of you have heard of SLAPP lawsuits before? All right, quite a few. So for those that aren't aware, SLAPP stands for...
Can you move just a little closer, move the microphone closer to you? Some people were having trouble hearing.
Yes, is this better?
Yeah, for the remote people, yes.
Okay. SLAPP stands for, it's an acronym for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. This is a phrase that was coined in the late 80s by two professors in Denver who were noticing an increase in retaliatory lawsuits against individuals, non-governmental individuals and groups who were engaging in some sort of speech or activity that was of a public concern or matter of public significance, and that would be activity and speech that would be protected by the First Amendment, right to petition and the right to free speech. And so they identified some of this, and I have, by the way, a PowerPoint loaded up, but I'm not going to go through it all right now in the interest of time. But these are essentially civil lawsuits that are filed. It can be a claim or a counterclaim, filed again against non-governmental individuals or groups because of their communications to a government body, a government official, or to the electorate at large, and it must be on an issue of some public concern or significance. I think one of the things that we need to understand about SLAPP lawsuits is that they essentially change the balance of power between parties. So in a SLAPP situation, you will see an imbalance of resources, whether that's money, wealth, influence, some form of imbalance in that situation. And that is because SLAPP lawsuits essentially intend to take a matter of public concern or significance out of the public arena and into the courtroom, which shifts the attention from the speech or activity that's being engaged in and towards a legal defense. It's also important to note that plaintiffs that bring SLAPP lawsuits do not intend to prevail in court. Often these lawsuits are intended simply to delay matters or to discourage individuals from continuing in that speech. It could be just until the point becomes moot. It could be until public interest wanes. Eventually, the point being that the plaintiff continues the activity that is unresolved in the public arena. Largely, these types of lawsuits take the shape of 6 types of torts, but largely libel and slander, so defamation lawsuits, or business torts, which could include interference with contract, tortious interference, or economic expectancy. Those are the most common types of tort claims that these are essentially masquerading as. So the simple elements are that these are civil lawsuits masquerading as potentially normal tort lawsuits that are actually not intended to prevail on the merits and are instead intended to delay, chill, suppress, or discourage free speech. I think we can go through the elements, we can go through kind of the procedure, but I'm going to pause there and let my colleague have a moment to speak if he so wishes.
If I can improve on anything you said, I would, so I can't, but I'll hush.
Okay. Well, I'll take some questions from members before we start getting into the nuts and bolts of the actual procedural aspects of anti-SLAPP legislation.
Okay, we have Senator Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know Nina, you and I have discussed this in the past, and I, as an attorney myself and somebody who regularly participates in the civil justice system representing aggrieved parties, I do have some fundamental issues with people having the right to access the courts for the purposes of preserving their reputations and I'll just be frank. The whole idea of the New York Times case, I think the Supreme Court got it wrong. I think, public figures that a lot of times the press and some of these people and organizations that put a lot of garbage out there do get a free pass in the media for saying things that simply aren't true, and that people have a right to go to court to seek recompense for any damages that are done. And I just have a fundamental issue with loser pays. I think when you have loser pays, that also inhibits people's ability to access the justice system. So, I can see some merit to what you're trying to achieve, but, I also think it's a slippery slope towards a system and a civil justice system in Kentucky that I just really am extremely opposed to, which is that the prevailing party always is entitled to attorney's fees from the person that doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of different types of lawsuits out there that are very difficult to prove in court. That doesn't mean that they were meritless at the time they were filed. So, although I appreciate what you and Representative Nemes are trying to do, I think they're, I have faith in the justice system to see that, the resolution, the right resolution comes about in most cases. So I do appreciate your efforts, but I have some issues with this type of bill.
Thank you, Senator. I completely agree with you. I trust the justice system, and I want people to be able to have access to the courts. This is when someone files a frivolous lawsuit. And having the loser pays, this is not exactly that. This is more akin to sanctions under Rule 11, which are already allowed and have been allowed in every court across the country for a long time. That's why groups like from the right, like the AFP, and from the left, like ACLU, support this bill. That's why the Kentucky Justice Association is not opposing the bill. That's why the Kentucky Press Association is supporting the bill. So I agree with all of your concerns. This bill is very tight. Let me give you an example that I read about last week. There was a mom who showed up to a school board meeting against CRT. School board files a lawsuit against her. Frivolous, completely a joke. Under this bill, she would have the right to go on offense against them and challenge them for bringing that frivolous lawsuit. So it's not going to be easy to prove. But if you file a lawsuit against someone for exercising the right to speak and participate in the public process, and they can prove that is a misuse of the court system, they have to prove it in court. Only then will this apply. Only then will it. So that's what this bill's trying to do. We're not trying to get away from the court system. They can still go to court. They have to prove it in court. We're trying to, and so you said about the New York Times versus Sullivan. I think the concerns we have here are in line with your view of New York Times versus Sullivan. We think people should be able to defend themselves, and we think they shouldn't be ruined financially if they've been preyed upon by a more wealthy person or more wealthy entity filing a lawsuit, a frivolous lawsuit, to get them to shut up. That's what this bill's about.
Mr. Chairman, if I have a brief response,
Okay.
I guess what I would say is you kind of made my point. There are procedures within the court system right now via Rule 11 and including a counterclaim for malicious prosecution that are available that I would think would essentially result in the same type of outcome that you all are seeking to effect with the passage of this statute. I mean, those are types of claims that you can assert, as a counterclaim if you seek legal counsel, and I think most lawyers would. So, I mean, it seems to me we already have rules and causes of action in place that would allow for the type of redress that you're seeking. But I appreciate your commentary, sir.
And very quickly, Chairman, if I might, Senator Wheeler, I completely agree with you, and I understand your concerns, and they're absolutely legitimate concerns. There has been a wide variety of anti-SLAPP legislation that's been enacted in many states. So as of today, there's 33 states plus D.C. and the territory of Guam that have some version of anti-SLAPP legislation, but they are not consistent. And they have resulted in a lot of meritorious lawsuits not being able to go forward. They have resulted in a lot of abusive lawsuits that have actually been filed as anti-SLAPP motions to dismiss. And so your concerns are absolutely legitimate. I will point out that some of the procedural items that you mentioned that could go to address this and your faith in the justice system, I think we all share that faith, is that essentially when you have a meritless claim that somebody has filed without intent to win, with the intention to delay, the person who is being sued by in a SLAPP claim is essentially responsible for the economic burden of mounting a legal defense for that meritless lawsuit. So the underlying cause of action or the underlying speech is continuing to be discouraged, delayed, chilled, and suppressed, which has a sort of cascading impact on the community. And so one of the things that I want to go through kind of the elements of what an anti-SLAPP, a good anti-SLAPP statute would have. And that includes a special motion to dismiss, which you'll find in this current version in Section 3, a freeze or a stay of discovery, and this version allows for a limited allowance for in the court's discretion in case there are facts that need to be discovered. So it's not an absolute stay of discovery. It's expedited disposition. There's got to be a hearing on this SLAPP motion if it is indeed found to be a SLAPP situation by the court. It requires a show of merit on the plaintiff's part, and it's got cost-shifting sanctions. So it's a burden-shifting statute and cost-shifting statute, which means if you're the person that's bringing this motion or this SLAPP suit, and somebody brings a motion under this act, you have to prove that your claim is legitimate, that it's with merit, and it's a probability. It's not an absolute, clear, and convincing standard. And that is something that these statutes provide, is a framework of identifying what actually constitutes a SLAPP suit and a way for the court to expeditiously resolve that meritless suit so that the underlying cause of action can move forward. So your concerns are absolutely legitimate. I want to point out that the ULC understood this and in July 2020 adopted a model bill, which this is a variation of, to address your exact points, because some of these statutes have been struck down. They found to be unconstitutional. They have had all of these issues that you are concerned about with the slippery slope. This particular draft has a lot of exemptions. It has a lot of different language changes from prior iterations of this bill that I filed and that exist throughout the country. And many, many, many conversations have taken place since 2019 to address particular language, particular verbiage, so that we don't follow this slippery slope, so that concerns that you have raised today are brought up and that meritorious lawsuits are not delayed and are allowed to move forward, while those that are baseless are expeditiously dismissed.
For the criminal law practitioners among us, isn't a perfect analogy, but it's akin to a preliminary hearing, in my view.
Representative Bratcher.
Why were SLAPP laws created?
So SLAPP is a lawsuit, right? So it's a claim that's brought strategically, and it's brought in order to essentially suppress an action or a speech that is being brought forward. So there are several examples that were provided by some of these organizations, and this could apply in whistleblower lawsuits. So that happened in Kentucky, where there was, against a mining company actually, where there was safety concerns, and the mining company sued the individual for defamation. And so that individual had to bear the cost of defending the entire process of that defamation lawsuit, ultimately prevailed because it was not a meritorious claim. So the mining company lost the defamation claim, but in the meantime, that litigation process took years, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to this individual, and didn't really change anything. So the mining company, whatever the dangerous practices were continuing to go forward. So it's brought in a variety of different cases, and it's sometimes difficult to identify something as a SLAPP suit, which is exactly what this bill tries to essentially present a framework for.
Do you remember when we passed, I guess it was 2017, that if you went to the appeals court, you had to do a bond? Is that in the purview of all this?
It has a similar thought behind it, maybe, Kevin. What you're talking about is in the planning situation in 2017, maybe in 18, I think it was 17. We passed a bill that said if you lose at the planning commission and you lose in trial court, then you go to appeal. If some people do that just to delay the process, so it kind of has a similar thought there in expediting a resolution. And so in some ways, I think a similar thought is present.
If your bill passed, how would it affect that bill?
It wouldn't.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for bringing that forward. I think I've learned a lot through this process because doing the kind of legal work I do, I didn't know what SLAPP litigation was until I got into this conversation. So thank you for your presentation, and very well done. Next we have, we went from slapping to now we'll do swatting. And so Representative Pratt, if you could come forward and you can get comfortable and introduce yourself and your guest, and when you're ready, proceed. Representative Pratt, make sure your microphone's on and close to you.
Sorry about that. It was not on. There you go. There you go. So there. Anyway, thank you, Chairman Massey. Thank you, members, for allowing me to present a swatting bill today. Much like earlier, you probably have never heard of swatting, and I did not until I got a call from my sheriff here, Tony Hampton, who was talking about a couple who got swatted in Georgetown. And at that point in time, what brought this bill about? Right now, a swatting call is a misdemeanor. It has no recourse to get compensation back, and that's what brought all this about. And at this point in time, if you will play the video, I think it's pretty self-explanatory as to what we're going after and why we're here. And they don't let me touch computers for a very good reason.
March 8th was a normal, peaceful evening for one Scott County couple, until this happened.
Central Dispatch.
I just shot my mom.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I just shot my mom.
Where are you?
The caller's details downright disturbing.
Why'd you shoot your mom?
We had an argument, and she tried to hit me, so I shot her.
The call, totally fake.
I want to kill myself.
Don't do that. Why? Don't do that.
But deputies didn't know that. Neither did the quiet, law-abiding couple about to be shaken to their core because of a prank called swatting.
The call had said that my wife had been shot in the face and killed.
I know. It's hard to talk about.
Keep your hands up.
See for yourself. This is ring video the night more than a dozen armed deputies swarmed the victim's street and home.
Who's all in the house?
I saw the officers in the side yard, in both of my neighbors' yards. They were, kind of hunkered down, running through the yards, and, I could see the rifles.
Y'all had a 16-year-old kid or anything?
The victims shared it to show there's nothing funny about calling in a fake emergency that could have turned deadly.
I'm gonna pat you down, okay?
Assault isn't a joke.
And that's exactly how we feel, that we have been assaulted. When I looked out the door, I saw an officer with a gun pointed at me, and I was petrified. I said, what is going on here?
Come on out, ma'am. No, ma'am, you're coming out now. Just come on out, honey. Come on out.
Oh my gosh, what is this?
Okay, here's what's happened. We received a 911 call, okay, stating that a 16-year-old said, I just shot my mom in the head. Okay, at this address. Okay, listen, okay, so obviously we're taking precaution.
It was terrifying, but the couple credits deputies for de-escalating the situation before either one of them walked out of the door. They say officers called them from a neighbor's phone.
I think the decision to go to the neighbor's house first, that was an outstanding decision.
What if they didn't go to the neighbor's house?
Well, I would have been very defensive.
This couple was lucky, and they know it. So what about the caller? Well, deputies say it's almost impossible trying to track down the culprit. And even if they do, the penalties are basically nothing.
The fact is, there is no swatting crime in Kentucky, right?
That's correct. There's no specific charge for swatting. I feel like that swatting is such more of a serious offense because of all the danger that it creates.
Come out and talk to us.
Less than a handful of states in the U.S. consider it a felony. In Kentucky, the charge in this case would be falsely reporting an incident, a misdemeanor. You can face more punishment writing a series of bad checks.
Yeah, to me that's a joke.
100%. This should be a felony. This should be a felony crime. We're still dealing with this trauma from this. And the idea that this could be associated with a video gaming situation or a prank call, this surpasses that by far. This is so much more than a prank.
Ma'am, come on out. Just come on out, baby.
She trembles, thinking she almost didn't walk out of her home.
And if it wasn't for my husband saying, baby, come on outside, it's fine. There's not a doubt in my mind I would have shut the door.
But it's just all the what ifs that could have really turned it into a bad scenario for, a lot of innocent people.
The victims forever jolted by someone's idea of a prank.
Can you do me a favor and put that gun up?
Yeah.
But thankful for the officers who ended their nightmare peacefully.
Obviously, you're alive.
Yeah, if they need a playbook on how to handle it the right way, then they need to look at how the Scott County Sheriff's Department handled it.
In Scott County, Lee Searcy, LEX 18 News.
Thank you. As you guys can see from the video, I want to thank the Scott County Sheriff Department of Deputies for de-escalating a very dangerous situation. Just recently in Tennessee, a gentleman was swatted and died of a heart attack. His daughter said he was shocked and confused after a swatting call and looked out at all the armed men in his yard and actually had a massive heart attack and died. So this can lead to death. And we, again, need to put some teeth in this. Now, again, as a youngster, again, bored on the farm, I have called a drugstore and said, you have Prince Albert can? Yes, we need to lay them out. This has nothing to do with this. This is much more dangerous. This is on a different level. But again, so at this point in time, I plan on filing this legislation today. But I also want to thank the staff, the Judiciary staff, for the hard work and helping me write this bill. As you know, I'm not an attorney, and also for Mr. Hampton, his leeway, and for LEX 18 for their production of this. So, if you don't have any questions, gentlemen, I would like to entertain them at this point in time.
We have Representative Banta first.
How many a year do you know in Kentucky that this actually happens, that we waste resources like this?
I can tell you since this incident in March, which we just saw, we've had 4 in Georgetown, Scott County.
Alone.
So statewide, I could not tell you, but I could research that.
Senator Turner?
As I understand it, and thank you, gentlemen for bringing this, but as I understand it, there still is a section for a Class A misdemeanor in here. The one that you're really talking about is whenever there's a false alarm involved in a fire, emergency, visual violence. That section A, you got this quantified in a section that's going to make it a Class D felony.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my problem is that's 1 to 5 years in the penitentiary. The problem I have is over on the next top of the section says if there's a physical injury to any person, which the case then becomes a Class C felony. So if the firefighter does make the trip and he shuts the door on his finger, there's a physical injury. Drills an ankle, there's a physical injury. We're going to put somebody in the penitentiary from 5 to 10 years for that physical injury under this bill. That's my fear.
Again, I don't know if I'm not an attorney, not a judge, so I don't get to say what is and isn't will get you there. But if someone is physically injured, such as, heaven forbid, while you're racing to that scene, you turn your cruiser or your fire truck over and you're injured, there should be some penalties with that.
Okay, there is a second position that says if it's a serious physical injury, it's a Class B, which goes to 10 to 20 years for that truck to turn it over. But if he mashes his finger on the door, drills his ankle, anything, the person gets 5 to 10 years in the penitentiary. See, it's a simple injury. I mean, I'm just letting you know there is a problem, and I don't mind trying to work this out to help get it amended to make some corrections, but.
Yes, we're glad to work with you on it, but yes, sir.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Turner, I'd like to make a response. And understand what you're saying about smashing a finger, tripping, twisting an ankle. But we had a lot of vehicles en route to this call and going at a very exponential speed to get there, not knowing what's going on. So we're looking at the possibility of a serious wreck, all kinds of possibilities. When we show up, a homeowner doesn't understand what's going on and they come out with a gun. So just want to throw that in there.
Thank you, but I understand that, but as a lawyer, when you write that legislation, that exception, you've got that for a class in the second section if there is a serious physical injury, which an accident could cause, and I understand that. You've got it going all the way to a Class B felony, which is 10 years to 20 years. But you're going to want for a simple injury, and I use that word simple, just a door smash, because it says injury, physical injury. I'm just trying to get that. So if you have no problem, that's my concern. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Turner, I will also tell you that these bills that we've discussed today are potential legislation. They're not filed yet.
Yep.
The whole purpose of having our discussions today was to bring these highlights to the attention so that the parties could get together and tighten it up or fix anything they need. So we certainly thank you for your comments. Next, we have Representative Bratcher.
Is it just kids doing this, or have you ever found who's doing this?
On the incident in March that Lee Searcy reported on, obviously he sounded like a young man, probably a teenager. We tracked this to Texas, and it looked like it was coming from a scrambled computer-generated phone number. We were able to track it that far, but at that point we have a Class A misdemeanor. So even if we identify who that individual was, our Commonwealth Attorney is not going to authorize us to extradite that individual for that Class A misdemeanor.
Well, it's just like these telemarketing laws that we've passed last few sessions. I guess it's just impossible to find out who's sending these phone calls when they scramble or whatnot. I think we're not getting enough help from the providers, AT&T and whatnot, but that's another subject for another day. But so you would have to put a lot of man hours in to find who this is. Is there any, with the misdemeanor that it is now, is there any civil penalty? Like, do they have to retribution or
restitution?
Restitution.
I guess that would be up to whatever was brought up in court, if that was a part of it. I've seen restitution be a part of plea deals or sentences. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Next, we have Senator Westerfield.
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff, good to see you. And Representative, thank you for bringing this. I support the bill. I mean, I didn't know what it was. When I saw it on the agenda, I was curious, and I hadn't heard of this happening, and the story that happened there in Scott County was relayed to me. It didn't occur to me at the time, but watching that news segment of it prompted this question in my mind. And Sheriff, you might be the best person to answer this question, but and it kind of goes along with what Representative Bratcher was just talking about and asking about. I'm curious what the dispatch system is able to see. And I know not every system around every county and every municipal area is the same, but I'm curious what it's able to see, and why, or is there something that maybe in addition to making this an offense, and I think we should, I support the bill, but I'm curious if our systems aren't sophisticated enough to understand that this number is it's not connected to that physical address, or it's not even at or near that physical address. And who knows if it was when they placed the call. I'm curious what the system can tell us, or what it could if we invested more in it.
So that's a good, go ahead, sorry.
That's it. Thanks, Sheriff.
That's a good question. And I was listening to the radio the night this call came out, and I immediately thought, could we be being swatted? Because it's happened before in Georgetown, Scott County. So I called dispatch and I said, what number did this come from? Did this come into 911, or did this come in from just a phone number? And they said, just a phone number. So I called a lieutenant that was en route and said, hey, just be aware, I think you may be being swatted, but we still have to treat it what it is, what the young man said that he'd done to his mother. So, yeah, that's.
Well, I think that highlights the need for not just the legislation that's being presented by the representative there, but also for us to have a conversation, and maybe in other committees, about what we can do to help these systems be more accurate and tracking this information when a call comes in. I'm hearing what you just said, Sheriff. You've got a top-notch team there in Scott County. I know you, and I know your deputies. But I wonder what might have happened if you hadn't called to give that warning. I'm not sure that everyone would have had the presence of mind to do that, and that's a terribly frightening situation for your deputies to be in, and for those homeowners to be in, who are clueless about what's about to come, literally knocking on their door. And as the representative mentioned, there have been fatalities. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you all mentioned this, but I've heard of situations where people have responded very defensively to law enforcement showing up, and it's resulted in casualties, or even in an escalated incident that would have been obviously entirely avoided had the swatting incident not taken place.
You're absolutely correct. And I give credit to my lieutenant for making the decision to call from a neighbor's house, from someone they knew, to give them a heads up. Hey, we're here. Here's why we're here. Because approaching that house with rifles, and some homeowners, like I said, they may come up with theirs as well. So it could be a very bad situation. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Next, we have Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the presentation. And I have to admit, this is the first I've heard of this being an issue. I haven't heard anything of this nature down in my part of the state. My questions were pretty much answered, and just a couple comments. I think with the next gen 911 with KSP, it might not be a bad idea, and you all may have already done this, to check with them and the new technologies that are available on how far that goes and what we can do to address Chairman Westerfield's issues. So I know that is a big push, and that is a large part of the cost of the technology these days, and why that next gen system is so expensive. But as we move forward with the KSP infrastructure, that may be something that we need to look into. And my second comment is this: I have absolutely no problem sending someone to prison for 1 to 5 years for putting that family through what they did. And I don't care if there was an injury or not. That's on the level of wanton endangerment. I've responded to those calls, lights and sirens, going at high rates of speed, putting other citizens at risk. It needs to be treated very harshly, and I have no issue at all with the injury part of that being a Class D felony. And appreciate the efforts. And you know, if this is probably still in its infancy, and we're probably going to see a lot more of this. And the more comfortable these people feel about maintaining their anonymity, the more we're going to see this escalate. So I think the technology part of it is crucial, Chairman Westerfield, and I do think with Next Gen we need to get some answers on what the technology will actually do once implemented throughout the state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next we have Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick points. One, the need to increase it to a felony, as the sheriff talked about, tracking it back at least to Texas. We really don't know where it originated from, but in a misdemeanor case in Kentucky, you can't extradite someone into Kentucky from another state if they've made that call. As a felony, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the Commonwealth attorney can seek then to extradite them back. So that gives another tool for someone who does this from outside the state. Second, in the question about being able to identify phone numbers, I'm assuming we've all been, I'll call us all victims of the spam calls we get, and it looks like a local number calling. So the technology's out there to call someone and it show up, you know, someone in the local area's number. So that's out there, and really that's something we probably need to address to try to put a stop to. I'm tired of getting those calls. And also it gets to the point, Representative Pratt was even describing to me that someone used it as basically as a tool of bullying or threatening. They were wanting to, they wanted somebody's name on a gaming system. They wanted to use that name for themselves and they wouldn't sell it to them. And so they swatted them and told them, you know, this is what's going to happen if you don't let me have that. So it's also used as a form of intimidation as well. And just wanted to make those few points, sir.
Next we have Senator Byrd.
Thank you, sir. I think actually both my questions have been addressed, but had this not been a misdemeanor, had this been a felony at the time, do you feel comfortable that you would have been able to identify the perpetrator?
That's a good question, and I was going to elaborate on that. In speaking with my detectives, they felt like with a lot more resources and time, they possibly could have located where it came from, but we have to dedicate our time to more serious offenses that that we can prosecute felonies, as opposed to what is now a Class A misdemeanor. So they did feel like that we possibly could have identified a suspect.
And then I think my second question goes to the technology, because I completely agree with Senator Westerfield and Senator Carroll. If we had a system in place, I mean, 911, like in Jefferson County, which is part of what, if you call from a home phone, it will identify the location for you. I'm assuming there is no way at this point from a cell phone call to identify the location of the caller.
So if we get 911 calls from cell phones frequently, and it'll tell us within so many yards or feet of where that location is. But with these scrambled numbers, it's different. It won't show a location.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
But heaven forbid if he didn't respond.
Representative Cantrell.
Thank you. I've been looking a little bit online, looking at some of the similar cases, and it looks like the Tennessee incident that resulted in the gentleman who had the heart attack, that individual was sentenced to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know what he was charged with?
I do not.
Because I'm assuming Tennessee doesn't have a similar, like it might have been sort of a different charge. So I'd just be curious about what the charge was and whether we have a similar charge here. It also looks like the article I'm reading. Do you know whether California has a specific swatting bill? Because they were talking about another case in California. A man admitted to making a phony emergency call to police that led to a shooting death of someone, and he got a 20-year prison sentence.
I have no idea what California's law is.
Okay, I'd be curious what those differences are. You know, one led to a 5-year sentence, one led to a 20-year sentence. We're obviously looking to punish people. My other question is, have I've been on some text threads with some individuals, and people are saying, well, why not wanton endangerment charge? It seems wanton endangerment is a pretty good catch-all crime that we have in our state for when someone is, recklessly and negligently put into a lot of danger. So why wouldn't that type of charge be utilized in this situation? Because it is a felony too, so it takes care of all of the concerns that have been aired out here today.
Well, without having the statute in front of me of wanton endangerment, I know you have to have wanton conduct, and certain things would have to happen to meet that threshold to charge them with it. I just feel like creating a swatting bill would be much cleaner and a much more efficient way for us to go after these people that are making these phone calls and causing the havoc that they are.
Well, let's check on some of those other states and see what they've done too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will make one comment, and the comment is simply this, that in addition to all the things we talked about punishment or danger, there's a tremendous amount of resources at bay here. I ran EMS for a number of years, and so when all your units are responding to that scene, there could be a legitimate call somewhere else that you don't have sufficient units to respond to. So there's a lot of things that go into this consideration. So thank you for bringing this forth. We'll continue to work with it. Certainly our staff will be glad to look into some of these things that other states are doing and report back. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, members.
We'll move now to our last, and we have a lot of people to present on this last piece, and this is something that is a carryover. There was a bill filed last session, and you can come forward, everyone. We have a whole group. We have many esteemed judges with us today, so they can come forward. Huh? Yeah. And so last year we talked about this, and it got out of committee, but the commitment was that we would revisit it this year. And so we have here with us today a great group of people. They all are very respected in their various communities. I think Judge Jameson brought the bill last year, so we'll let him go first and just introduce himself, and we'll go down the row so everybody knows who's speaking today. And I will tell you, though, as we go about this conversation, that there's a commitment by myself that we will have some further discussions beyond today, because there are other people that are affected, whether it be sheriffs, whether it be jailers, et cetera. There's a whole lot of components that would have to go through this. And I thought last year when we brought it, there's probably not going to be enough time unless we have time to sort through this. So please know that we'll get us through as much as we can today. We've got 45 minutes. We'll allow room for questions, but there may be some other meetings forthcoming regarding this particular topic. So with that, Judge Jameson, you have the floor, and you can either introduce them or let them introduce themselves, and you can proceed.
Microphone.
Important topic, and I appreciate you having us here today. We got several individuals with a lot of experience on the bench here to talk about it from judicial perspective, and so I'll allow them to introduce themselves, starting with Judge Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and be able to share some experiences about virtual court and some of the concerns I had. So thank you very much. I'm a district judge from Campbell County.
Patricia Summy, I'm a circuit court judge from Kenton County, president of the Circuit Judges Association. It's a pleasure to be here, but there are a lot of nice junk out on the road on the way here, so I almost stopped a few times. But really happy to talk about this, and more than happy to enter into any kind of discussions, because I know everybody's got some sort of concerns about what's going on here. So open discussion is always good with me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Laurie Dudgeon. I think everybody knows I am actually not a judge, and everybody's probably very grateful for that. I am the director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, and really only here to talk about a little bit with respect to where we are on the technology side statewide in all of our courtrooms and our ability to support this initiative. So,
okay. Just to get started, I get to kind of carry us back into the session. First of all, why am I here at Okay, go ahead, get a little closer. First of all, why am I here at all? Well, I was asked last session to kind of get with the partners on virtual court, everyone that would be affected or be a stakeholder in that, and did so, just trying to see if we couldn't come up with some legislation that everybody could be okay with. And of course, that's always the sausage process. You guys know very well how that goes down. And it was something that was concerned to me and also to my state representative, Chris Freeland. We had discussions about that. So the long and short of it was the original bill was introduced with, I don't think there was a strong expectation that that was going to pass in its original form. There was a committee sub filed that changed everything from mandatory to permissive, if I remember correctly. There was another committee sub, however, that was really the work that I put in with all of the other individuals. So head of the Commonwealth Attorneys Association, county attorneys, sheriffs, jailers, CAECO, and also talking with Mr. Preston from DPA. Not saying all of those supported the bill. I don't think DPA. I think they have their concerns, and Mr. Preston, I can express those. But the one that did not get filed, I have with me. I hope the committee members were sent that this morning by Mr. Nacy. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review it or not, but this is a compilation of the opinions of everyone that was talked, spoken with, and but there were still concerns on many issues and how we're going to carry this out in a practical way. Different jurisdictions have different problems with carrying out virtual court, et cetera. So this was the language that was agreed upon by everyone except for we couldn't get a confirmation from any other the judges associations, and there is no way to do that because you have no one person who speaks for all of the judges as far as their opinions on laws. Now, they may speak for them on such as the chief on other issues, so that was the biggest effort there, was trying to get some kind of language as a start. And is that a statute or several statutes, or is it a criminal rule, or is it a combination of the two? And how does that all lay out? There are probably some constitutional potential issues with doing all of this by legislation, but some thought that the Supreme Court may or may not adopt these policies if they were passed through comity. Obviously, the policy of the Supreme Court, where they can decide that something does violate the Constitution, separation of powers, but then also uphold that statute because they believe it's good policy. So now that obviously couldn't be determined until the Supreme Court heard it on a challenge. But there are legitimate concerns there because this does get into area that typically would be left to the Supreme Court. As far as going forward with a statute itself, one of the biggest concerns across the board from the players that I mentioned earlier, sheriffs, et cetera, was having a statute that required jails to cooperate with virtual court so that there's consistency across the state. Right now, there are many that still participate in virtual court. The ones that I deal with, most still do virtual court, but we have some that do not, and there's legitimate reasons for that. Those are things that are going to need to be addressed to figure out, why is that a serious problem? For example, in Jefferson County, that's a lot of issues when they hold people from all over the state. How are you going to have room, space, technology to carry out virtual court with courts all over the state? How are you going to schedule that? Those sorts of things. Although it was arranged for about a year due to COVID, but I don't think anybody thinks that was the perfect way to carry it out. This language in the amended bill, the original bill was pretty much mandatory across the board. This one is not. It is permissive except for when an inmate is held outside of that circuit. Now, I'll tell you, that's not really the best way to draw that line because you have circuits like Kenton County, Judge Summey's circuit, where they have several circuits in one county. So that's not a good way to draw that line across the state. So perhaps a mileage line, 100 miles was thrown about by a couple of different players. But the idea being the situation that was presented to me this morning, actually by the head of the Jailers Association, that they have one that is in Campbell County last week that needed to go to Fulton County, and took him to Fulton County, but he had court again in Campbell County the next day. And so somebody's got to go nearly clear across the state, both directions, to do that. And it was an appearance that, my understanding, it was less than 10 minutes. So those are the sort of situations I think that for judges like myself that are, I guess, say pro-virtual court, although acknowledging that there are things that need to be worked out. Those are the sort of things that I think this is intended to go after, is those very short hearings that you've got someone having to haul somebody long distances and expend a lot of resources. And it's my understanding from conversations today, all of the groups except for the Commonwealth Attorneys Association that I mentioned earlier still endorse this amended language. Now, does that, again, come out as a mixture of legislation and a rule, or that's for somebody else to decide? But as far as this language, they still endorse that. Commonwealth attorneys asked me told me that their official statement was that there was concerns about the problems with virtual court, and that there needs to be some figuring that out, and they're going to discuss it more at their next meeting. And I think that's what all of us are saying, is that there are problems that we need to sort out. What happened at the beginning here this morning, I think, is a perfect example of the sort of issues that we have on a regular basis. So we need the technology in place, the training in place to make everyone more comfortable with it. Some people are just more comfortable with technology than others, all of those sorts of things. And I'm kind of speaking from opinions of all of those groups that I've talked to. So this is not me speaking for any group of judges. I am here as Jamie Jamison, who happens to be a circuit judge and had to live through this, like everyone else, doing virtual court due to COVID. And but there are benefits. Speaking with KBA, current president of the KBA, their membership clearly believes that virtual court should continue in some form or fashion. I think that's part of the discussion. Is it just civil? Is it all permissive? Should there be some mandatory? If there is mandatory, what does that look like? Those sorts of things. So I think there's lots of different issues there that need to be vetted out, but the core being that virtual court as a whole, it's pretty hard to, have a logical conclusion that it doesn't have its benefits and that they're worth pursuing. It's inconvenient for all of us. I mean, I end up having to do sort of a virtual court each docket and an in-person court each docket, and it's a hassle. It takes a little extra time, et cetera. But I think the advantage is there, protecting officers from not having to be exposed to that transport, almost eliminating escapes. In my experience, escapes always generally happen when someone's in transport, or certainly when they're out of the jail. There are some examples where they leave the jail, but that's generally not the case. And then quality of the job for the sheriffs or whoever in that county is having to carry out the transports. In our jurisdiction, we don't have the manpower to send two people on a transport. So you might have someone who's convicted of some very serious, dangerous crimes, and you've got one gentleman who's generally been retired, and this is a part-time job for him or her, by themselves to go pick this individual up, carry them across the state, and have to stop and go to the bathroom a few times and get a meal and all of those things. So there's potential for danger to those officers there as well. So a myriad of benefits. I know CAECO, from speaking to their legislative representative this morning, who I believe is in the room, Hampton, that they very much still endorse this and believe it would save a lot of money. And the corrections impact that went along with this, it's right on the LRC website, talks about all sorts of financial benefits to Department of Corrections, also to counties, sheriff's offices, et cetera. But there will be an expense for getting things up to par, which I believe AOC was tendered an additional $4 million in their budget this year for virtual court, and some concern by the jailers that they may need some funding. Whether it comes from this body or wherever it comes from, that may very well need some money to carry out the technology the way that it needs to be done. So that's kind of the catch up. As far as moving forward, the partners that I've spoken with, I think all sort of agree that jumping right into let's just do virtual court is just not a workable plan at the moment. But this body, however they'd like to proceed with either forming a commission or another body, with all of the interested parties looking into the issue and figuring out what's going to work where and what's not, and how we carry those things out is probably the option I think most everyone agrees is prudent. Another idea that came up was perhaps treating it like you do, or we did drug court years ago. Basically allow the judges that want to do it, to get a test pilot out there, and then come up with rules and procedures for how to carry out virtual court based on that, and then perhaps make it more widespread down the line. So that's what I have up front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that, in working with, and we're going to let everyone speak, working on this last year, I heard things that I didn't even anticipate. And I talked and talking with Ms. Dudgeon, talking with the AOC about how, some places have the capability and some don't. Some have good bandwidth, some don't. I had those personal experiences myself where you're on a call and they tried to get somebody in another jail out of the area, and they couldn't get them on the call, and they weren't going to disrupt their whole docket, so they had to move on. And there's just a lot of things and pieces that go with it. But I do think we learned a lot through the pandemic that we can maybe benefit from. And so the goal is to bring some of the people that do this every day to the table, like yourselves, and try to find a way that's workable. So with that, we'll move on to Judge Thomas. So Judge Thomas, please feel free to share with us.
Thank you. Am I on? There we go. I think you can hear me now. Is it recording? Great. Thank you so much. I've been a judge for 25 years, so I've done court a lot of different ways. And I love pilot projects. I love trying new things. I will tell you the pandemic is probably one of the hardest things I ever had to do and still run a court and make sure everybody had been heard and make sure all due process rights were given, to make sure all my pro se litigants could take the benefit of the court system the way they were supposed to. So the pandemic caused a lot of issues, but I agree with Chairman Massey, it also caused a lot of opportunities for us to re-examine how we held court and what we did and how we did it. What I will tell you, I'm sure that we all have horror stories about how we held court during the pandemic, doing virtual court. I mean, I can tell you about the lady that took me shopping at Walmart. That was fun. During criminal court, or the guy that came in half naked. That was also interesting. We've all got those stories. Anybody that's run a virtual court during the pandemic, you don't even want to know some of the things that went on. And we've learned to deal with them in various ways. I will also tell you that even as of yesterday or Friday, I held court and my links froze. So I'm in the middle of court, hooked up to a jail, and all of a sudden everybody's frozen. So we couldn't move forward. We've got officers in all kinds of different ways. It was just a mess because we're not quite there yet with the technology. At some point, I even had to use my cell phone as a hotspot to run court because everything went down. Fortunately, I knew how to do that, thanks to Judge Blau, who is the one that's taught me how to do a lot of this stuff. In fact, we bought our own camera system because we're just not there yet, technologically speaking, to be able to do all the wonderful things that we think we can do and utilize it. I did want to share that most jurisdictions, I think, have done this, in that we were asked by the chief to look at our local rules again and to see what we wanted to keep virtual and what we didn't, what worked and what didn't, how we were going to handle our virtual processes. My Zoom is running the entire time I'm holding court. Criminal court, civil court, doesn't matter. That thing's running. We have a process where all civil cases, all probate cases are deemed virtual unless you call and ask to be in court. All criminal cases are deemed in court unless you call and ask to be on virtual. That's working for us because of how we're handling the situations, and we're able to get the bar interested in that and be able to get that information to people. It has its drawbacks, definitely, but it works for us because we were able to fix our technology to make it work. Other jurisdictions, they're not interested in Zooming with me. I can't get Boone County to come online at all, and I've tried. Kenton will. And we move things around and we call and we get, that kind of stuff with anybody that will. We try. We really do try. But technology is terribly difficult to deal with at this point in terms of all of us. I think Judge Jameson and Judge Lemmy would agree. All of us around the state have different issues and different problems associated with virtual court. I think probably I'm going to yield any time I have left to Director Dudgett so she can actually tell you about that stuff, or do you want to?
We've already talked. I'm going next.
Okay, go ahead.
It's really good to be with you, and I'm glad that we're invited to the table, because I think last year when this particular bill became somewhat problematic, there was very little input from judges, and they felt, as we were, the individuals who were in fact most affected are the individuals we serve every day. So we're really happy to be here. Can't wait to be in the room with those other individuals who have either monetary stakes or security stakes or any of those other things, because obviously we all work better when we work together. One of the bigger issues we're hearing about just now in terms of extradition, of course, is a very expensive transport piece. So talking with my jailer and my sheriff about that the other day, going, well, if you're going to California to get somebody who only owes me $2,000, I just issue a warrant. I don't know they're in California. Why isn't someone calling me? So, there's lots of communication issues that we all get to work together. And I think that this process, now that it's been all brought here, I think will be pretty substantial. I don't want to go into, I have had, so the association doesn't speak in just one voice, but as I said to Representative Massey last year, we're trying to get that Survey Monkey thing together, and I'm just not a tech kind of girl. But I've been getting comments in. The family court judges are extremely concerned about remote. Everyone is really concerned about, I guess a forced issue. An arraignment in the old bill, if it was in another county, was mandatory. Some judges, if that's a murder arraignment, might be okay with that. I may not be. If someone is being arraigned on a murder, I don't want to be told I can't bring that person into my courtroom. There is some concerns about transport from other jails. And sometimes what happens, not to get into the weeds, I'll have somebody released, ROR, in another county far away, but they've not yet been released by that jail on the charge in that county. When we're made aware of that, we can work with that and try to make that as minimalistic as possible so they're not traveling for a short period of time. But that's, again, a communication piece. And so lots more communication needs to go into that. So we did learn a lot about COVID during COVID. COVID was a real forced issue. I have people back now that I haven't seen since the March before who have lots of issues going on that are finally in my courtroom. And the judges are starting to find out for themselves, coming back a little bit because of the current COVID issue, how they may or may not want to use this. There are some judges who love it. There are some judges who hate it. I will tell you the majority of judges feel that there are certain appropriate uses for remote. So it's not as if you're walking into a land where everybody says, no, we don't want to cooperate. No, it's also convenient for me to use this, but we all know the Constitution trusts convenience, and so anything that's going to affect a defendant's right or affect someone else in terms of credibility is something that group in that particular situation needs to look at. So I just want to say, just a little concerned about a full kind of look at mandatory, just because everything is circumstantial, and look forward to working with everybody on it for everybody's best interest in using taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Judge. Lori?
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, thank you. Members, I also want to just thank all the members of this committee and all of your colleagues for the investment in COVID relief funds you made in the court system and our ability to upgrade the technology that they talked about. When you passed House Bill 556 last year specifically, you appropriated $6 million to expand video arraignment systems to all courtrooms, and then $4.6 million to support video conferencing systems to permit a hybrid court model. When the pandemic began, we all flipped the best we could to the use of Zoom. We were plugging up basically television monitors in courtrooms to essentially create a hybrid environment for folks who were appearing remotely and some were in person, just as you experienced at the beginning of this meeting. And I know that LRC has quality equipment, and even sometimes you have challenges with quality equipment. So we were basically using duct tape equipment together in a lot of our courtrooms to try to create a record, and then a record that's going to be preserved into our JAV system for a record on appeal, if that makes sense. So this approximately $11 million you appropriated to us is going to make it possible for us to upgrade with consistent technology in all 463 of the courtrooms that are in the Commonwealth. When the pandemic began, we only had this technology in 55 courtrooms. So that's why you see the variety statewide. One of the things that I know our CIO would like to tell you, and I think our judges would too, ease of use in the courtroom is important. The ability to switch from a criminal motion hour to a in-person hearing. Right now, it's not easy for our judges to use, and our bench clerks still need to be our bench clerks. So we have a staff issue that we know we have to address as we look at supporting remote court. And I know that we focus, and obviously the interests in this committee are in the criminal proceedings. But I want to share with you, I think the chief may have shared with this as I looked at our practitioners in the room. I know that you each have a significant amount of your practice is devoted to the civil practice. So the court's responsible not only really for the criminal rules in this area, and I spoke to Justice Keller this morning, but also the civil rules. But at the Bar Convention in May, 764 attorneys responded. 90% supported the use of remote proceedings in civil motion hour, but only 39% in the room supported it in criminal motion hour. In civil hearings, we saw the number drop to 57%. In criminal hearings, even lower to 20%. We saw 35% supporting it for arraignments, 20% for bench trials, and then 40% for oral arguments. So I think when we say that we've got to get all of the stakeholders together in one room at one time talking about this, this is important. And I appreciate your interest in this, especially in the criminal rules context. One of the things that Chief Justice Minton and Justice Keller wanted me to mention, because I know at the time of this hearing, we were really thinking this was maybe something the Criminal Rules Committee could look at. But what we realized in that moment is that we don't have all the stakeholders in the Criminal Rules Committee, so it's going to have to be a different group. And what the Chief and Justice Keller proposed is that we create a Supreme Court Task Force Steering Committee for remote proceedings, because the court also has to address not only the criminal rules context, but also the civil rules context. And they talked about bringing the judges, the clerks, the prosecutors, the public defenders, the private bar, the jailer, the sheriffs, CACO, the Access to Justice Commission, and many others. I think our legislators in the room, because no matter what the court can do by rule, the court can't tell our jailers or our sheriffs what to do. And I think we recognize that, and I think that's where, you know, your help is definitely needed. We talk about, when the pandemic hit. So we feel like, especially I think from the administrative side right now, that we're still very much in the pandemic. We have employees testing positive every day who are quarantining. We're bringing ServPro in every day to clean courtrooms and facilities. We're still trying to figure out how to have jury trials when we have a 10% positivity rate in the state. It's still a challenge for us. Excited about the opportunities that we have, excited about the partnership with the legislature, and very grateful for the money that's going to make this possible to roll this out. I think the big important piece, and Shelley and I were talking about this just before, is to get the systems in place in the jails is critical, but the jails were never designed to have remote hearing rooms in the jails. And they're certainly, not staffed. Our jailers will tell you they're facing staffing shortages like we all are right now. And it takes a lot of jailer time to support this. So that's another piece of that we have to, try to solve as well. So these are just, I think, some of the things that we wanted to talk about today. And again, Chairman Massey, thank you for the interest in this issue and keeping this moving.
Thank you very much. We will. I've got want to defer to Chairman Westerfield in just a second. I will say that there's some things that came up through the last process that I want to hit on. It might spurn some discussion. First of all, there were some folks that thought that we were going to impair the discretion of judges, and that there is no desire to do that. There are certain circumstances where you need that person there, whether it's a civil docket or a criminal docket. You just need them there. You know, they're not complying, whatever the case may be. You just need them there. That's certainly, we don't want to change that at all. We have heard from the sheriffs about their concerns with staffing and the time it takes. We had a recent case that I'll just throw out there from Boone County, same thing. We couldn't get the jail online in Fulton County, so we had to send 2 bailiffs down to get the individual, bring him to Boone County, and then drive him all the way back to Fulton County and then drive back. And that's a lot of hours on the road, a lot of time, a lot of taxpayer money that, depending on the type of hearing, might have been able to be averted if they were able to do it remotely. Now, that being said, I understand that not all jails are up to speed, and I get that. I know that they don't have the rooms or the capacity or the people. And so the idea here is to have these discussions to get cooperation and collaboration among ourselves, and not, you know, it's like not waiting until all the lights are green before you go, but going ahead with the green light in front of you and then getting to the next step. And so what we're trying to do is to get through those steps. So I'm committed through the rest of this interim session, not necessarily in a committee meeting, but to having some additional meetings, whether it's through a task force or whether it's through an unofficial group that sits down with representatives from these various stakeholders that tries to work through this. I'm a fan. I mean, I wasn't sure I would be a fan initially, but having done it, you know, I think and on the admin side, away from this, you know, still workers' comp is still going to all video admin hearings. I did a trial for the Kentucky disability through that. It was a 3-day trial, and I did it by video, and it worked. But that's different than a criminal trial where you might be affecting somebody's constitutional rights, et cetera. And we get all of that. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces. I know judges are like lawyers. If you put 10 in a room, you'll get 300 opinions. And I'm not being critical, because you're at the top of your field and you see a lot of experiences. You have a lot of experiences, and something else spurns a new idea. So I want to get us together. I think we need to take advantage of what's in front of us and make what we can workable. Some of it may not be workable and we have to discard. But you know, that's what we want to do. So I wanted to keep the discussion going. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Chairman Westerfield.
Thank you, Chairman. Judges, thank you for your time and for your presentation. And Laurie, thank you for your information. Actually, I think remote court ought to be available for any litigant that wants it, period. If the court has some desire, particularly in a criminal case, as the chairman just mentioned, for some sort of compliance reason, for good cause or something, if the court believes it's necessary or in the best interest of justice or whatever, to have someone appear in person, I can understand that. But otherwise, and particularly on the civil side, if a litigant wants to appear remotely, it's dumb to not let them do that. I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm not going to mention the court, but I've already told Director Dudgeon this. I told the chief this in a meeting a few weeks ago, and Judge Jameson, I may have shared this with you as well. But I had to cajole for the better part of 10 minutes the secretary of a judge. I didn't even get to talk to the judge to appear by phone to save more than an hour one way of driving from where I was going to be to appear for a hearing to reschedule a foreclosure sale. You 3 judges know how little opposition there typically is in a motion to reschedule a sale. And like every other foreclosure, it's got 15 or 20 parties, all the different interested folks from the city and the county to the property owner, the foreclosed property, the bank, so forth and so on. No one opposes it. It's the procedural next step that you've got to do. And of course, no one opposed it in this case, but I had to spend 10 minutes to save myself more than 2.5 hours of driving round trip for a hearing that took exactly 20 seconds. And thankfully, I was able to succeed. I managed to let them appear by phone. Of course, no one else showed up. I've been in a courtroom where just in the last few months, and again, I've shared this with you, Director Dudgeon, where the bailiffs are yanking the equipment out of the room in front of my eyes because they just don't like Zoom or they don't like fill in the blank platform. I don't care if it's Zoom or something else. But while that's happening in the last 2 or 3 weeks, at least in the western end of the state, I saw on Twitter this morning, the 3rd Judicial Circuit here in Christian County has issued an order. It was signed yesterday by all of our judges, circuit and district and family here in Christian County, and it was effective today. That because Christian County is now back in the red, that they're requiring masking for everyone that shows up. And only in the court's discretion can the mask be removed, and only if social distancing requirements and standards are met and so forth. And I say all that because here we are, we've got this Delta variant that's causing new concern. At the same time, we've got courts yanking foolishly this equipment out of the room because they don't like technology, or they don't like the cords running across their courtroom, or some other, with all due respect, dumb reason. They don't like this. I think it's dumb for us to foreclose or stop an opportunity to use technology to bring efficiency, to save costs, to save time, and frankly, to improve participation of litigants. And virtual court's been able to do that. In every court I've been in where it's been used, perhaps your experience, the 3 of you in your counties, is different. But in the court, and I haven't been in front of any of your 3 courts during this time, but in the courts I have been in a number of counties around the state, the anecdotal information suggests that attendance has been much better. I've been covering dockets in Jefferson County, and there are people who show up. Now, they've got to be reminded, just like you have to remind litigants that walk in the door right now in your courtrooms who may not be dressed quite appropriately for the occasion and for the decorum and for the spirit of the room and the business that's going on. And they've got to be warned that perhaps more so with Zoom. But there are people who show up because they can do it from the comfort of their kitchen or their living room, where they're confident and at peace and at ease, instead of in an intimidating room. And this, I'm just talking about the civil docket. Instead of showing up for court, going through the metal detector, not sure if they can bring in their purse, not sure if they have to wear a mask, and then they're surrounded by bailiffs at any given time whenever they're in the building. If a litigant wants to show up for a civil hearing, they ought to be allowed to. I fully support AOC, and I'd vote for any other appropriation you need to make sure every court has the opportunity to staff and put all the equipment necessary that it needs wherever they need it to adequately do this. I'm surprised to hear any opposition from jailers, and I know that there are several jails, many jails that are short-staffed and struggling with issues. This seems like it's an enormous cost saving, not to mention a labor improvement. Instead of having to fiddle with transport, they've just got to fiddle with a camera and a computer. I think preserving the record is important, but we've managed to do this it was rocky, of course, and there are still places where it's rockier than others because of the equipment or the lack of sufficient equipment, but we've managed to make do for a good long while now. I'm tickled it's given us a chance to see where we most need to put help, but we've shown we've been able to do it. I'm not aware of anybody who's filed an appeal and hasn't been able to perfect their appeal and pursue it and prosecute it fully because they didn't have a sufficient record created. Maybe you all are aware of a case like that. Anyway, that's my position. I think it's dumb for us to abandon this when it allows practitioners to go everywhere. It allows litigants to appear at a better rate than otherwise. It's more cost efficient. It's different, and that's true, and can sometimes be cumbersome. But we all can experience cumbersome friction even when we're there in person. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate your comments. We have Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. And as a fellow that's been practicing since '78, been in courtrooms and tried cases from Bowling Green to the Chief Justice, all the way in eastern Kentucky, all the many counties. Familiar with them. The pandemic really causes problems. First of all, I want to volunteer to join this group of people that's working on this. Based on that, my experience is my jail is 6 miles away. So during this pandemic, if you had a criminal defendant, you're standing up at that little camera of the judges, and you and the judge and the prosecutor and the defense attorney, and you can't talk to that poor defendant. I will have a problem with mandating all of those appearances by video. I mean, that's just because of the layout of the systems. I don't think we're there yet. But I would like to work with the group. I've been in Bell Circuit and Harlan Circuit, just different ones during this pandemic, and appreciate worked with as you know, with the Chief Justice, trying to get some of this stuff, as I saw the problems in conveying my concerns and knowledge to the people to get it worked out. So I'd like to volunteer for this. I think it needs, as Chairman Westerfield said, we need to keep this thing going in that direction, getting it done. It's been a great, workers' comp, as the Chairman said, I'm in that also, and they've back to virtual in that. I saw that same thing come down. But I would like to work to get it as best as I've experienced, and if you all will accept me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Wheeler, did you have something?
Yeah, just briefly, really, I couldn't agree much more with what Chairman Westerfield said. I think he hit the nail on the head spot on. And I'm not going to say there's not a time and place for in-person hearings. I mean, I do both civil practice and a lot of workers' compensation law, plaintiff perspective. I think when you're dealing with simple motions, especially if you're the plaintiff in the case, the burden of proof, if you choose to show up virtually or think you need to be there virtually, I kind of think that should be the choice of the party putting the motion forward of whether or not they want to show up. I think we ought to have the option of appearing virtually if we want to. Sometimes when you're in Eastern Kentucky, you may have motion hours in 2 or 3 different counties on a single day, and the beauty of the virtual system is you can hit all 3 of those hearings when otherwise you would be dealing with 4 or 5 different lawyers and their calendars trying to put those or trying to find coverage. So I think it is something, especially on motion hours, that we need to continue. Now, there's other parts of the system that I do think. I mean, if you're going to try a case, I would want to be there in person. I don't like virtual workers' compensation hearings. I think there is a value to the judge seeing my client, hearing him, looking at him face to face when he's talking about the pain that he's in, when he's talking about his injuries. I don't think you really get all that through the TV. But when you're talking about procedural motions like what Senator Westerfield talks about, frankly, it's just a foolish waste of resources all the way around to require attorneys to travel to those types of things. If anything, and no offense to my colleagues on the defense bar, the only complaint that I've heard is they don't get a bill for drive time, which I understand that. I want everybody to be able to make a living, but that to some degree is not my problem. I shouldn't have to appear in court just so they can get their drive time in. But I agree with Senator Westerfield. I think he's spot on, and I hope that this is made a more permanent part of the judicial system. So thank you.
I think Senator Schickel made a stroll down to see everybody. So he's been on the call the whole time, so we appreciate that, Senator. We have a question from Senator Berg.
Thank you, sir. Just a comment. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I'm a physician. And it's hard to tell, but it was probably about 10 years ago at the VA, maybe a little longer, we were told that we needed to start doing virtual medicine. And my initial response was, you're crazy. There's no way to do this without seeing people, without touching people, without being able to look directly in their eyes. How are we going to do this? And in fact, I was wrong. And not only have we been able to do it, but I think we, in a lot of circumstances, have been able to offer a better service at a much more effective cost. Because, particularly the VA, you've got people coming in from all over the state for what is just, a routine checkup, that you don't have to drive. We can do this remotely. I don't know if you all heard, Senator Westerfield. He made his point. We felt his emotion. We understood what he was saying. And he's on a TV in front of us. So it's doable. I mean, yes, the technology has to be in place. And I know at the VA we spend a lot of money getting that technology in place. In the long run, is it worth it? I think in our new world, absolutely. Absolutely. So I encourage this discussion. I'm very much in favor of what you all are looking into and trying to do. And then the last thing I would do is, just caution all of us, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of other, states and jurisdictions that are working on the same exact thing we are. And, there's going to be best policies that are going to come out, and there's going to be, guidance as to what really works and what doesn't. And I would just, encourage all of us to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that we have somebody from the Sheriff's Department here too, or the Sheriff's Association. Mr. Wagner, is he still here? I know he's here, and I know that you're in support of it. I don't know if you want to say anything or not. I just know you were in the room. You had texted me, so I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
I did not.
There you go.
No, I am very good. I appreciate all the conversation here. I think we're moving forward. I appreciate the judges giving us the opportunity to have input, even in their own counties. I know there's been a lot of conversation with all of you for the last few weeks, so I am more than appreciative. And I'm pinch hitting today. Our president, Sheriff Ward, he also lost a deputy this week to an accident. But thank you all for the opportunity, and we look forward to moving forward.
Thank you very much. I find it ironic that we're having this discussion about virtual hearings while many of our members are participating remotely or virtually. I also find it ironic that during session, because of COVID, we were permitted to stay in our offices and vote from our offices, which actually worked effectively, but kept us safe because, at the time we didn't want to be in any more danger than anyone else. I think there's a way to navigate through this. I think common sense has to be the rule of the day. Obviously, if there's a place that doesn't have adequate equipment or doesn't have adequate staffing, you have to consider that. On the other hand, if there are places, as Chairman Westerfield said, that do have adequate equipment and can do it but choose not to me that's problematic. That's just not addressing the situation. So I think we've got to find a way to all work together. I certainly am empathetic to the words of Senator Wheeler. I remember the days before any of these video hearings when I was going to be tried to be two courts at one time, and the question in my personal mind was, which judge am I going to tick off today? And I try to call ahead and let them know I'm running late, and they're very understanding. Don't get me wrong. The point is, there's a lot of efficiency for a practitioner to be able to do virtual court. Especially if in most cases, all the judges in the cases I've done criminally have asked, do you have any objection to appearing virtually? And they'll say no, 90% of the time, if not more. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, I'm an optimist anyway, but I'm hopeful that we can work through the situations that we have to hear, the successes you've had, the failures you've had. And like I said, I am going to continue this process. I think it's the prime time to do it. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. Judge Jameson, Judge Thomas, Judge Summey, and Lori, I appreciate your commitment. We've talked offline several times about this, and we'll continue to work together with the sheriffs, with the jailers, and with all those people that are affected by this. So I appreciate your time. With that, we're out of time. So I want to thank everyone for participating today and coming down. And we try to keep these meetings very informative, so thank you for being here. And we'll look forward to the next meeting with Chairman Westerfield that will come in September. I had to get my dates right. So thank you, everyone, for participating. Is there anybody, before I get off the call here, that was on remotely that is concerned about not being reported as present? Because we had that little snafu at the beginning. I just want to make sure that everybody that wants to be accounted for is accounted for. We think we have everybody because we got your logins. because it's remote. So thank you very much, and everyone have a great day. This
Good
meeting is
meeting you, Chairman.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Hey,
Probably been in. I was going to say, we can talk about bail